Welcome to Face to Face, connecting theater makers to the public, a program from the Legacy Theater and socialdistancetheater.org.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Face to Face. Today, we have a very special guest with us. He is a Broadway performer and concert soloist, most known for playing both Raoul and the Phantom in Broadway's The Phantom of the Opera. But he's also starred in many other Broadway musicals such as Les Miserables, Sideshow, Showboat, and more. Recently, he appeared in the revival of Stephen Sondheim's Sweeney Todd off-Broadway as the titular character. And right before COVID, he was working on the world premiere of a new show based on sculptor Camille Claudel at the prestigious Signature Theater in Virginia. It is my pleasure to welcome Hugh Panaro. Hi, Hugh.
Hi, Tess. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm great. I love you. It's great to see you.
Oh, it's so great to see you too. So how have you been doing during all of this craziness?
Pretty good. You might be able to tell because you know me pretty well. I gave myself a bad COVID quarantine haircut yesterday in honor of your interview today.
Oh,
yeah, I got a little crazy with the brrr. I wanted to look cute for you.
so what have you been up to during quarantine besides haircuts?
Well, I brought you some show and tell because I did learn. I've made my own mask, no sew. It is a no-sew mask that I learned off a YouTube tutorial, and I'm just going to say, God bless YouTube tutorials, because I have been learning all the things that, we kind of take for granted. I've really been kind of on a knowledge quest, just in really enjoying taking time to stop and look at things in a much deeper way. The whole getting back to nature thing has been maybe a silver lining in this. Now, a lot of our friends and our colleagues are in New York and, maybe in a studio apartment. I can't imagine what that must be like, because I have been so grateful to just be outdoors as much as humanly possible, whether it's hiking or foraging.
Have you been doing anything to stay creatively fulfilled during quarantine, or have you been kind of stepping away from that because you were working on a project right before this?
I was, as you had mentioned, I was working on Camille Claudel at the Signature, and we were so close. I mean, they had just finished the set. I had my final costume fitting. I had the most magnificent beard to look like Auguste Rodin. And I had found these beautiful antique glasses that he wore online, not the replicas. And literally, and the final straw was the night before they announced that the show was shutting down, I got in the mail all of my opening night presents for everybody.
Oh.
So I have them in a little drawer wrapped up. And I was thinking maybe I should get everyone's address and send it to them. But I'm remaining hopeful that when all of this starts to change, that maybe when things reopen and theaters are starting to perform again, that the cast will be reunited and we can pick up where we left off, because we literally were about to start our tech.
Wow.
So I will tell you that emotionally, I drove home from Virginia to Connecticut, and it was about a 6-hour trip. And I did a lot of meditating on the drive, and it took me about 2 weeks before I could actually shave off my own beard that I had started to grow for the show. I was still very attached to the character and rehearsal process, and I was texting my leading lady, Teal Wicks, who was playing Camille, and texting our director and creative people, Nan Knighton, our writer. It was very kind of hard to just go from, the rehearsal process where you are just full speed ahead, living, eating, breathing something. So I was teasing, I was teasing the composer, Frank Wildhorn. I said, I have been singing all of his beautiful music to the chipmunks and the squirrels while I do artwork, yard work. And they haven't thrown tomatoes yet. But after that, after I withdrew, I think the shaving of the beard was very symbolic. It was like saying goodbye to Rodin for a while and coming back into me. And I have been playing the piano just for me a lot, just almost like therapeutic, just really, because that's how I started my career. I don't know if you knew this, I started as a church organist.
I did not know that.
When I was in 4th or 5th grade. So for me, keyboards, that was my way of expressing myself, was the piano and organ, until I started singing when I was 12. But by the time I knew you, I really wasn't really doing much with the piano. And so it's been nice to kind of go back to that.
So let's talk a little bit more about Camille Claudel.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a new musical, or I should say is, because we're holding hope.
Yeah.
It is a new musical about a turn of the century French sculptor, and you were playing Auguste Rodin.
Mm-hmm.
Who,
good pronunciation, Tess.
Thank you. I took French. And he eventually becomes her lover, but is also her mentor, correct?
Yes, she starts out as his student purely by dumb luck, because her teacher had to go to Paris and Auguste filled in. He was teaching a class specifically for women, which in those days was like, oh my God, taboo. The stuff that we learned, Tess, in just the historical process of this woman's life was really eye-opening into the inequality of women. We think it's bad now, but I mean, back then, women were just treated like property. And if you do research on Camille Claudel, she actually spent the last part of her life in an insane asylum, and she was completely sane. But because she was this forward-thinking, modern woman ahead of her time, the men that she came into contact with, they didn't know what to do with her, and her own brother put her into an institution. It's a heart-wrenching story. Not nearly as dark as I make it sound, because the music is magnificent and we try to approach and celebrate her life. But Auguste Rodin, who was a very famous sculptor, started as her teacher. She was only 18 years old, and she challenged him from day one, and he had never had anyone challenge him like her. And as a result, I think he was intrigued, and she actually became his muse and ultimately his lover. And she did get pregnant with his child. Now, historically, we don't know. There are many schools of thought, and this has actually been kind of like duked out between historians. Some people say that she did not have the child, that she disappeared and had an abortion. Other people say that she did have the child, and a friend of hers was actually raising her baby, because I think it was for every year she would disappear for a couple months. I believe it was in the summertime, and no one knew where she went. And it was rumored that she went to visit her child. It's fascinating. There's so much meat there. I mean, we didn't get into a lot of the darker aspects. We really celebrated her work. And finally, I think it's only within the last few years, maybe even a year, she has her own museum in Paris and is finally getting some of the recognition that she deserves. But she was ahead of her time in so many ways.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, she was an amazing, I mean, I'm a little obsessed with her story. I was ignorant. I didn't know anything about her until I got involved with the workshop of this process, of the project. And now I'm in awe of her.
Back when I saw you in January, we had a conversation about intimacy direction. And I was telling you about my experiences with it as a college student, since it's such an emerging field in the industry and something that they're trying to incorporate now, especially into rehearsal processes. And so you actually had an intimacy coach on this project.
Tess, I'm telling you, I had never, until we sat down that night and talked over dinner and maybe a glass of wine or four, I had never heard of this before. It was new to me. And you really educated me on this subject. So when I went into the process, one of the first things I asked about was the intimacy coach director. Before I barely had a sentence out of my mouth, they said, we have an amazing person that has worked at the Signature. And it was life-changing, and it was great. It brought us together, I think, as a company, because again, with this particular piece, because of all the sculptors and the art form and the time period, there were a lot of nude statues being done. So we had both men and women in the show who had to drop their robe and become artists' models. I've never done that in a show, and I don't think any of these actors had either. So to do that, to get your comfort level, and it was such a beautiful and a very natural thing to have this coach there with our director and the musical team and everybody else, and was an equal part of this process. And I was blown away, and I'm just so sold on it. And I just think, I can't believe I had never heard of that until you told me about it. And I think it's phenomenal.
I think so too. And
yeah.
For those of you watching who don't know, intimacy direction is kind of this emerging thing in theater and film and television. And you have to be certified kind of like a fight director, and the coaches will basically walk the actors through. And I think there might be a few different vocabularies, but basically it establishes a common vocabulary between the actors, and kind of a set of ground rules and checkpoints so that you can create healthy boundaries, and really establish that, you know, it's a working relationship, and so it doesn't kind of bleed into other things. And I think it's really fantastic that we're moving in that direction.
It's literally like a dance, isn't it, Tess? I mean, we had a beautiful montage of lovemaking that was literally down to beats. It was set to music, first of all,
Mm-hmm.
but not only did it help with the intimacy and our comfort level between actors, it actually made the scene even more beautiful, because there were ways, you know, if someone, for instance, the director would say, and now you move in and just kiss her lightly. And the intimacy director had ways of even caressing the human body and making it more beautiful, and taking it away from any vulgarity, was even that potential being there, so that it was based on the intention of the director and the actor. The intimacy director, I found, helped shape the physicality of how we touched each other, and where you touch someone's face, how you caress their ear, or whatever. It was really just beautiful.
This is a new work, and you have developed a lot of new works, and created original characters. You created the role of Buddy in Sideshow. You created the titular role of Lestat, which was a musical written by Elton John about vampires.
Vampires, and
But I do want to hear about your process for developing a character in a completely new piece versus stepping into something that's very iconic, like The Phantom or Valjean, which you've also played several times, and kind of how those processes differentiate for you.
I think, as you probably know from your experience as well, each director is going to bring a different vibe to the room. And I think that sets the tone. I will say, I know a lot of actors don't like going into pre-existing shows. I've heard the term cookie cutter, or, you know, lack of spontaneity. It's not organic. I never had that experience with Phantom. I always felt very heard. And yes, you wear the same costume, makeup, tuxedo, you sing the same songs. You have to hit the same marks. But within that framework, I always felt that Hal Prince, being the brilliant man he was, and he would capitalize on whatever it was that you brought to the table. So if he saw you playing Christine, he would say, what does Tess bring to this role that some other actress might not? And to me, a really great director capitalizes on the piece of clay that is in front of them, and they kind of sculpt you to fit within the picture that's already been done. So I will say that Phantom and many other things were quite beautiful, stepping into a role that Michael Crawford created, and I never felt the pressure to be, something that it was something different than myself. The joy, obviously, when you get to create something, and I'll speak, Sideshow was magnificent. That whole experience was just like a veil of love covering us all from beginning to end. I did a show called Martin Guerre, which we premiered in America. Again, you get to create from nothing. With Camille Claudel, what was really mind-blowing was when you're in such a beginning phase of a musical where songs are still being shaped. And our composer, Frank Wildhorn, is just such a cool dude. First of all, he's like the coolest person, comes from the pop world, the rock and roll world. And, was hearing me do something. He goes, what if you go up here? And I'm like, can I do that? He goes, dude, let's try it. And it was like the songs are being rewritten to your voice. And by the time you get to that, last week before you're in tech, you feel like, oh my gosh, this fits me like a glove. That key doesn't sound exactly right for you. Let's try it up a third. Oh my God, now it's coming to life. What if we did this? What if we did that? And it's a whole artistic process that I don't know that I've ever had that quite experience where you are literally having songs rewritten and tweaked and harmonies and things changed in the middle of your day, where it just feels so artistic, and working with the book writer and going, forgive me, I have been living this role now for 6 weeks, and this one line is just, can I play with this? Because it's not, I'm not feeling, it doesn't feel truthful. And sometimes it's met with, no, say the line I wrote, or, okay, yeah, let's play with it. And that process of, come here, go away, come here, go away. I think it's the most rewarding process to be a part of it, from really like a workshop phase. And even though we were in rehearsal at the Signature, it was treated more like a workshop. So I hope and pray that we all get to jump back into the deep end of the pool and keep going.
And I'm curious too, how long, since you've done quite a few of new projects, how long did it take you to find the confidence to speak up like that and kind of contribute creatively and not feel like you were stepping on people's toes, or, find the right balance?
Yes, that is the most brilliant question. And I'm wondering this because you know me a little bit. I went to 8 years of Catholic grade school, and I went to Catholic high school, and I was the quintessential good student, good kid, only speak up when you're asked a question. This was one of the first times, and I literally had to say this out loud, and I said this to Tila, my leading lady. I said, I have to leave the good little boy at home. And even if someone, you're always taught that if you speak up, that, actors should be seen and not heard, just do what you're told. And that's been a lot of my upbringing, and that's how I've been conditioned. So to be able to speak up and speak on the behalf of your character is not the most innate thing for me. And this was a growing experience in that realm as well, because I got really good at taking care of Auguste Rodin and making sure that everything that I was portraying was truthful and real. But there were many nights that I would go home and go, oh God, I hope they don't hate me. That whole thing, about like, because you're afraid, everybody wants to be liked. When I first joined Phantom, Tess, the actor who was playing, I was Raoul, the actor playing the Phantom was Kevin Gray. He's no longer with us. He left the planet way too early. Kevin was one of the first examples of being fearless. And he taught me, this is back in 1991, yeah, 91 or 19 or 90 or 91. When I watched Kevin work, he was fearless. He didn't care if he fell on his face. He didn't care if he sang the wrong word, the wrong note. He went for it. And I just remember God thinking, I wish I could be like that, because I was so careful and I didn't want to rock the boat or get anybody mad at me or say the wrong thing. And Kevin was fearless. And I think if I could go back in time and change anything about my earlier life as a young actor, is to incorporate more of that fearless quality that Kevin had. And I think it's actually, people respect you for speaking up and taking care of yourself. Obviously not being a horrible person, but I think everyone can tell when it's coming from a good place. And that's what I really loved about this experience. Eric Schaefer, our director, was magnificent. And there were some times where I could see if I pushed too far. It was very clear in a loving way, like, okay, take a step back and then let's revisit this. And I also do believe it's an actor's responsibility to try everything at least 3 times exactly the way it is on the paper and the way you're told to do it, and keep working it. But then you do have to listen to yourself and you go, oh, something's not right. If something doesn't feel right over and over, you have to listen to your instinct and go, okay, not feeling real, not feeling truthful.
I'm so glad that you segued a little bit into Phantom, because obviously we have to talk about Phantom. You are one of the few actors to play both Raoul and the Phantom. You've been back several times since you originally stepped into the role. So I'm curious if it's different each time you've gone back and stepped back into it.
Absolutely. And the only way I can explain it is just pure life experience. When I played Raoul, a lot of this always kind of boggles my mind when a lot of actors are playing Raoul, or they are bored playing Raoul, or they want to play the Phantom or something. I loved playing Raoul. And part of that was because that's where I was I was young. I was 25 years old. I kind of could just put on the costume and show up. There wasn't a lot of life experience that the character demanded that I hadn't also experienced, whether it be, first love, all the emotions that come with the arc of that character. So I loved playing Raoul. I wasn't sitting around going, oh, I want to be the Phantom, I want to be the Phantom. And it wasn't, I never actually really had my eyes set on the Phantom. It wasn't until I had done Showboat in London for Hal that he felt that I had the weight, emotional weight, and the age behind me. And that was about 10 years later. So he said, there's a situation where the current Phantom is taking a break, and I was wondering if you'd be interested in playing the role. And I was like, sure. I wasn't like, I really didn't know what to expect. And it was really wonderful. However, that was in 1999. And I only did it for 6 months before I left the show to play Martin in Martin-Guerre. 3 years later, I got to revisit the Phantom again. So I came back to the Majestic. And who would have thought that 3 years difference would make such a huge impact on the way I played the character? And it was only 3 years. So then I left to do Lestat, Elton John's musical. And 6 years went by. And I got to go back and play the Phantom after that. Now, if you think 3 years makes a difference, go back 9 years later. And, I always talk about one specific thing The moment in the end of the show when Christine gives the Phantom's ring back to him. It's I don't know, maybe, I don't know, 3-second moment, let's say, I don't know, even at that. And in those 3 seconds, my whole younger life, and falling in love, getting married, getting divorced, finding myself, realizing who I am, would play out in that one little moment. And so much would go through you that, again, I just didn't have the emotional bandwidth at 25 to experience a lot of that stuff. So, and just, again, certain things, even with your physicality, as we get older, you walk different, you feel different, your knees hurt, your shoulder hurts, all these different things that come into play. But I really do feel like just the pure life experience, the death of a parent, the death of 2 parents, all of those things, 9/11, all these things that have come into your life, they have to affect you. If they don't affect you, then you must have some strange force field up to not let these things in and let them really do you. Because if they come into your life, they've got to affect you in a profound way, as is what we're dealing with now with this quarantine.
One of the questions that I was going to ask you was, given all of our current circumstances, what advice would you give to people my age who either just graduated or maybe are graduating in the next year, who have done all this training and are trying to enter the industry, or I guess anyone at any age who is trying to find work as an actor right now?
I have a few things that I have become my Bible. Some of them I've learned, some of them I've been taught over time or learned or come to believe. No matter what timing, I think this is a different hurdle. But maybe now more than ever, I think it will be important for us, when we get the opportunity to enter that room for maybe 5 minutes in front of that long table of many people that we might perceive as judging us, which they're really not. I think they're actually in there hoping that we are the one that walks through that changes their lives. I do think it is going to be more important than ever to be the most authentic versions of ourselves. I think you and I have spoken about this before. There's only one me. There's only one Tess Adams. We're chameleons as actors. I think it's very easy to imitate and admire and copy and think, oh, what are they looking for? How can I go in there and be what they're looking for? As opposed to going in there to that room and have your 5 minutes to be the most authentic version of Tess Adams, to be the most authentic version of Hugh Panaro, because I think it's scary. I shared with you before privately that when I was younger, I didn't know who I was. When I moved to New York, Mandy Patinkin was everything. He was just the most magnificent performer. Everybody wanted him. I had seen him in everything. Evita, Sunday in the Park with George, The Knife. And again, because we are actors, I would go into my initial auditions and kind of do my best Mandy Patinkin audition, thinking that the imitation, thinking that that's what they wanted. And thank God there was a magnificent piano player, Michael Biaggi, who saw me out on a break and just said, Hugh, can I give you some advice? And I said, sure. He said, and he busted me. He said, you do a really good Mandy Patinkin impression. And I was like, what do you mean? And he said, if they want Mandy, they're going to get Mandy. You got to figure out who you are, what you can bring to the table, and bring that to the table. If they don't like it, they don't like it. If they love it, they love it. But at least they're seeing you. They're not seeing you do a bad impression or a good impression of somebody that you're not. It's a very scary thing, I think, to be the most authentic you and know that you might walk into that room and they might not dig you, but they might. But how can you know what their reaction will be unless you really present the most authentic person? Another thing that I do believe, which again, partly because you and I have history, I think you need a good support system. I think you need really good people that love you and know you and nurture you for who you are, and friends. And I have some really good friends who I have been neck and neck with for the same parts. And I think that's the real test of your friendship and how you support each other. Because again, just because you and your friend are up for the same thing doesn't mean you're anything like each other. Some maybe you have a little bit more in common than others, but one of you is going to get it. And a really good friend of mine was up for Magnolia in Showboat, and it was down to 2 people, and I saw that she was crying, and I said, "What's going on?" And she said, "Well, I didn't get it." And I, immediately I went into like caretaker mode. I'm like, "I'm so sorry." And she just said, "You know what? It's okay." She said, "I really believe that there's enough for everybody to go around." That has stuck with me, Tess, in my entire adult life, because there have been things, I'm sure for you, I know for me, that there have been roles that I thought were meant to be. Like, if I get this role, it's going to change my life. Or if I don't get this role, I'm going to die. And most of the time I haven't gotten those roles. And then other things where I never would have thought of, I didn't set out to play the Phantom. That's something that came into my life very organically and changed my life. So we don't always know the trajectory that we're on, or even what's going to be the best roles that are going to change us and shape us. But I think having those people in your corner that can, hold you when you don't get the gig that you think is going to change your life, and just have them love you unconditionally, that's important, because they're going to be the same people that are there on your opening night when you do get a gig that changes your life.
Through all of your years doing all these iconic performances, what have been your favorite or funniest on-stage mishaps?
Mishaps. Well, so when I was playing Raoul, Mark Jacoby had taken over as the Phantom. Kevin Gray had left, and Mark Jacoby was the new Phantom. And Karen Culliver was the new Christine. And I thought we really had great chemistry, the 3 of us. We were really tight, and we'd have Chinese food in our dressing rooms between shows on matinee day. And in the very last scene, if you remember, Raoul is behind the portcullis. He's just come up through the lake, and he's soaking wet, and he's saying, "Free her, do what you like, only free her. Have you no pity?" And the Phantom says something like, "Your lover makes a passionate plea." And the last thing that Raoul says is, free her, free her, free her, let me see her." And the Phantom goes, "Be my guest, sir," and does this big gesture to open the gate, the portcullis. So I came up and I say, "Free her, free her, free her, let me see her." And Mark Jacoby, rude, goes, "Be my guest." And he goes, "Sir." I'm like, "What is that?" And he's like gesticulating down a lot. And I'm like, what? I thought he was like losing his mind. And Karen Culliver runs up to the portcullis with her back to the audience. She said, "Your fly is open and your shirt is sticking out." So I looked down, and not only are my black tuxedo pants completely unzipped, but my shirt tail is like sticking out like something.
Uh-huh.
And so Mark was trying to give me like the sign, like, check your pants, check your pants. So he's like, "Be my guest." So let's just say, thanks to that moment and Mark Jacoby, the last thing that I do before I walk on stage is the ever so important fly check.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Hugh, for taking the time to
Thank you.
chat with me. And I know that everyone who's watching this is going to love hearing your advice and your wonderful stories. So thank you. And I hope you have a wonderful afternoon.
All right, you too.
Thank you for joining us on Face to Face. We would like to thank our sponsors, Oak Tree Development and the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven, and Brad Ross for the themed music. You can follow us on legacytheaterct.org.